So we got Phil Mancini, one of my longtime friends, and I'd say a stakeholder in this town. Been around for a while. Have a business that's been thriving for many, many years, and Michael's on East and the catering business and all that you do here with the community. I mean, I'm excited to have you here, and I really want to share your journey, right? Having grown your business from scratch to where it is today, and all the community relationships you've built, and how special I think a lot of those are. I mean, that's one thing that you can't replicate necessarily in a business. There's the specialness of relationships and sort of the core values that you bring to the table, and I really want to share that. So, I know a lot about you, but I don't think maybe everyone listening knows about you. So share a bit about, the journey, sort of like maybe.
Man, I go way back.
Let's just chapter book this out. But I mean, what led you to, what you do now, which is running a, hospitality business?
It's a pretty interesting story. My father had the first cable car diner in Rhode Island. It was on Charles Street in Providence. And I just learned this myself, actually. It was 1946.
Oh, wow.
And the reason why is that diner still exists to this day, which I found only about 10 years ago. It's called the Bolton City Diner now in Bolton City, New York. And it is 100% restored. It's absolutely beautiful. So, and I hope to someday buy that diner, actually. I've tried to buy it a couple times and somebody bought it instead of me. So I'd like to own it to kind of complete the whole circle here.
Yeah.
But, so we've been in the restaurant business our whole lives. I mean, my uncles worked in the diner. My aunts worked in the diner. We lived in a neighborhood that we were very lucky that happened to have a catering company right in the heart of the neighborhood. And I used to deliver newspapers there. Guy's name was Paul Audette. Amazing guy. And he had about 7 different catering routes. Plus he did a lot of Newport too. And, we'd deliver newspapers there, and he would give us a job, washing dishes. We're only 12 years old, washing dishes. And he kind of helped pull the neighborhood kids together because he kind of employed a lot of us. And, by the time we were 14 years old, he had us cooking. And by the time we were 16, he had us waiting tables. And I remember this because I know that we were so young when we were waiting tables that none of us could drive. So he'd have to get somebody to drive us there.
That's awesome.
That's kind of how it evolved. And then, other than the catering end of it, my uncle, when my dad passed away at a young age, my dad passed away like 48 years old. My mother was 31 with 6 kids. So we all had to go to work. 6 kids. So we all had to go to work. And we were all 9 years old and under. So we all had to go to work at some point at a pretty young age. So my Uncle Alfred actually took over the diner that my father had. And every time we turned 14 years old, we had to go to work for my Uncle Alfred. We didn't have a choice. He would come pick us up. I'll never forget this. Pick us up after school at 3 o'clock. We would get home 7:30 at night, and we would have to work 4.5 hours after school, and he'd give us $65 each cash.
Nice.
And every one of us kids had to do it when we turned 14. The nice thing about it was, because obviously my mother had her hands full, he taught us how to drive a car. He taught us different things like that. And then, we worked there probably 17, 18 years old, but between his restaurant and between the catering company, me personally, I've been doing this my whole life.
Yeah.
And so when I got out of high school, I said, we were very lucky because Johnson & Wales College was started in Providence.
Yeah.
I was the second graduating class from Johnson & Wales Culinary School. And when I say the second graduating class, I recently found a bill that I'd gotten, and the semester was $250, and it was typed on a piece of yellow line paper. That's now Johnson & Wales Culinary School is about $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
So think about that.
Wow.
And it was
inflation.
But what Johnson & Wales had that I really enjoyed was they had a great placement program. So if your first year in school, you could be placed somewhere in the country. So first job I had when I left Rhode Island was they placed me at the Empress Room in Orlando. The Empress Room in Orlando was the #1 restaurant at Disney World. It was where all the executives and everybody ate, and they entertained all their big dogs. And it was a small dining. It was in the Empress Lily. It was all the way up top. I worked under a French chef, and he was also the executive chef of all Disney World. So it was kind of an honor to work in that kitchen. And I worked there probably about 3 months, and I went back to Johnson & Wales, went back and tried to figure out, I was going into my second year, and I enjoyed leaving so much. I begged them to let me do a second year and do another externship, which you're not supposed to do 2 of them. But somehow I got through the system and they put me through on a second one. Well, the second one was they were trying to get 2 kids to come down to the Colony Beach Tennis Resort.
Mm.
And I'm going to tell you, Mike, I never forget this. I drove down here. I was driving down 41. We all know what 41 looked like 40 years ago. Okay. I don't think there was another car on the road.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. I called my mother and I said, I'm turning around and just coming back. There was nothing here. I hadn't made my way to Longboat yet.
Not yet.
So I finally made the turn to Longboat, got to the Colony, and then when I got there, I mean, you saw the Longboat was beautiful. There was a beautiful resort.
Yeah.
And Dr. Clauber up there, he kind of he well, I wouldn't say at the beginning, because he didn't particularly like me when I started working there, because he actually didn't like the way I dressed, to be honest.
How were you dressing back then?
It was, pointy little Italian shoes, Giorgio Petrini shoes, the skinny ties, the look.
Yeah.
Very early 80s, very late 70s, but I love to dress like that.
Yeah.
And he walked in the dining room one day and he looked at me and he says, "Who is this kid?" And he says, so anyways, Michael, a lot of people don't know this, but Tracy, who's been working with Michael Zanise for 30 years, I worked for Tracy's mother.
Oh, wow.
Tracy's mother was the dining room manager at the Colony. And Harriet took a liking to me. And Harriet said to Doc, he said, well, before you judge this kid's pretty hard worker and he knows what he's doing, right? So things went on and on. So finally, Doc took a liking to me. And he used to have a place on St. Amand Circle called Special Place. It was a clothing store. And he took me down there and he completely wardrobed me in polo clothes, which was pretty traumatic for me.
Became a Floridian.
Oh my God! So I ended up having to wear all polo clothes every time I went to work, and beautiful jackets, beautiful pants, but was not my style at all.
Yeah.
So it was funny because Bud Collins, who was the famous tennis pro MC, he was one of Doc's best friends. He walked in one day and he says to me, he says, "Phil," and he says he was always down there at Christmas time or whatever. He says, "Polo Phil now." And that name stuck with me for years. And he called me, and a lot of people, they call me Polo Phil almost the whole time I was there.
Man, bring it back.
So, I was there for about 3 months, and I was there another 3 months. And Michael's father came to me and said, Doc said, "Phil," he says, "could you stay during the season?" Obviously, I didn't even know what season was down here.
Yeah.
And I checked the school, and the school said, "Well, you can finish your college. I only had like 2 more courses to go." He said, "You can come back late and finish. Why don't you stay down there and do your thing?" So I'd stay down, and I was down there another 3 months, another 6 months. And then I don't know, I must have been about a year and a half into it. Still hadn't gone back and finished school.
Yeah.
And it was one Christmas, and I'll never forget this. Michael's father called us up to the front of the property, and there was 3 brand new cars. It was a Lincoln Continental, a Corvette, and something else lined up. And there was myself, Frank Caldwell, and Michael. And he gave each of us a new car for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
I'm only a couple years in there.
Yeah.
So now it's pretty hard to leave the Colony.
Yeah, you're like, guess I'm not leaving.
I'm here
Colony.
2 years. I'm supposed to be here 3 months. So then we keep going and going and going. Before I know it, it's 4, 5, 6 years that I was up there, and it was 1986 or something. Michael had left the Colony. Michael wanted to open a restaurant called Michael's on East, and I'd gotten to the point where, I was 26 years old, and I was getting ready to get married, and I said, I got to give this a shot on my own. I don't want to be the person that has regrets down the line.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'm going to leave the Colony. Michael's father was pretty upset with me. Matter of fact, he didn't talk to me for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
But then we rebonded and everything was fine after that.
Yeah.
But he just thought we would all be there forever.
Sure. Yeah.
So I ended up, Michael left to open up the restaurant. I started a little catering company called Sarasota Catering. I bought a $29 answering machine at a yard sale. I'll never forget, put it in one of my bedrooms, this little tiny room I had, hoping that somebody would call. There was a couple of people called to ask for lunch, and I was paying my bills off $300 lunches. But then I got tied into a restaurant up in Bradenton, and I was building a little bit of a catering business out of that restaurant up in Bradenton. Then that restaurant was going out of business. And I said, it was unfortunate that the restaurant thought that by the time, he said, well, the restaurant's going out of business, but we don't need it anymore because we got this booming catering business. I was a little bit confused. You had a restaurant. I have a booming catering business,
right.
And if you don't have the restaurant, I don't need you anymore. So I moved on, and I was talking to Michael one day, and I went down, when he just opened the new restaurant, and Michael's on East had a huge kitchen, massive kitchen. I think
was it always over there?
Yeah, it was always over there. But I think Michael actually built it to probably have some type of catering business down the line or something, because the kitchen is massive in the back. And
Yeah.
I was talking to Michael and I said, I got kind of like this booming catering business, I said, but I got nowhere to work anymore. And Michael said, well, come on down here, use this kitchen, and I got in the back. Kitchen was big. So we started tying the catering company and some of the cooks down there. I had some of my own people. One thing led to another. Well, the little Sarasota catering started getting called Michael's on East Catering. And then Michael had about 20, 25 investors in his restaurant when he opened it. And, the investors then started getting, oh, well, now we have a catering company. Well, you don't have a catering company. I have a catering company, But I think what we can do is come up with a way that we can all be happy, and figure out a way that, Michael, the catering company would blend into the restaurant. All the partners would be happy. And we came up with it kind of like I think it took us about 2 or 3 year agreement. And so at the end of it, Michael and I would own Michael's on East Catering together.
Nice.
And so it worked out for everybody. And it's been 30, oh my God, what is it? Michael's been 30, I've been there 35, I think, years. I think Michael's been there 37 years. The courtyard at the ballroom at Michael's on East opened about 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah.
That was a pretty interesting story too, because, I've always had the catering mentality. Michael's always had the restaurant mentality. And I said to Michael one day, Michael, why is there no ballrooms in this town? Why is nobody catering in this town? I couldn't understand it, because I come from the north. Your father comes from up north. You know how that goes. There's a catering facility everywhere,
That's right.
And, we looked at each other and I said, Michael, we should, try to figure out how to get a catering facility in this town. So we're sitting in the courtyard, and where you see the ballroom now, we were joking around, said, well, let's just build it right over there and be done with it, right? Well, we looked at each other and said, we see the courtyard and see this ballroom. And we said, I wonder if that would work. So we started looking around. We got an architect coming in. Turns out everything that we wanted for a ballroom, I wanted at least 13-foot ceilings. Okay, it had 13-foot ceilings. The bathrooms were already there. They were the common bathrooms for the spaces over there.
Yeah.
So we had all the space there. We basically just gutted the whole thing and did a nice remodel on it. And there was a gentleman in this town called Ed Keating. I'll never forget. And he lived on Longboat Key. Nice guy. From Chicago. Very successful. And said, if you guys build this place right, I want to be the first party. I don't care what it costs. That's basically what he said. And so we built it. We did it. He walked in one day when we were almost done. He looked around. He says, you built it right. And we sort of did. Michael's on East Ballroom wasn't supposed to be that big. We were leaving the space on 41, and that was supposed to be its own separate space. But by the time we started knocking down walls, we just knocked them all down.
Yeah.
And, expanded into the ballroom. And I would say that the demand for it was, we're going back, building 30 years ago, and it wasn't that expensive to build 30 years ago. Plus, it was just building a box really and decorating it.
Sure.
But I remember we were given a 1-year note at the bank. Not 1, not 10, not 21.
Yeah.
They wanted to reanalyze it after 1 year. So they called us in after 1 year, and basically, we're calling up the note. And then they said, well, but the room had already had a lot of buzz in the community. People were starting to use it. People were finding places, finding different events to have at it. And they would basically said, well, we can probably expand the note to 10 years. And said, no, we don't really need you to extend to the 10 years. We're going to be all right with the 1.
Yeah.
The demand was so strong.
That's good.
And, we really didn't want a lot of debt on it. And it just carried its thing. And it's been, all these years. And then 10 years later, we took the restaurant on I think it was its 10th anniversary or 15th anniversary. I remember, again, we sat in the restaurant and said, what do we want to do with the restaurant? What do we want to do different, this and that? So we started talking about we were remodeling it, this and that. And before we know it, we were down to the bare walls. And so that turned out to be a labor of love there, a project of love. And, look, it's been.
How is the catering business and restaurant business in general, how has that whole business sort of changed or stayed the same over the last 30 years?
Well,
Maybe this just
people don't
this
realize this, but when you really look at restaurants now, you've got all these different. You've got Uber Eats, and you've got all this takeout. A lot of people learned a lot during the pandemic how much money takeout can add to their bottom line. A lot of people, like we learned a lesson. we didn't really seat for dinner in the courtyard till the pandemic. Then we realized, oh my God, look at this demand for the courtyard. So now we figured out a way to use the courtyard for the restaurant and the ballroom. And we're picking up some nights 100 covers during season in the courtyard. It's
Wow.
beautiful out there to have dinner. We have people that will only eat in the courtyard. so, I think that the restaurant industry is extremely hard just to be a restaurant. I think you have to reinvent yourself, and I think, you see a lot of people, you see a lot of focus on, of course, alcohol and beverages and all specialty drinks and this and that, so that's reinvented the restaurant business a lot. And I got to be honest with you, I kind of figured it out 30 years ago, the catering business is a nice end of the business to be in. And it's the business end of it that I loved. I didn't just like, the restaurant end of it or the cooking part of it. The catering end of it came with a creative part of it.
Yeah.
To create events. You talk about relationships. You create long-term relationships. I mean, 2 weddings I'm doing next year is 2 kids that I did their bar mitzvahs for, and they're both in their 30s.
Wow.
So, and their parents have been friends of mine 30 years, 25 years, and this goes on. And, so we've kind of gone from having, beautiful events to beautiful celebrations. And then, of course, we've had our share of celebrations of life too recently.
Sure.
Which is a little sad, but, it's people that have had a great life, and it's nice to see them celebrating at the end.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, it's a good business, but we've got a little bit of everything, we're in the restaurant business, we're in the wine business, we know how to utilize the amount of space that we have to its maximum. And we're in an independent operation, and it makes a big difference. I mean, it's really hard to talk to, chains and franchises and private equity groups and all these people and see where their heads at on different things, where, I'm going to be 64 this year. You're never changing me. I'll tell you right now, nothing's ever going to change. I'm going to do business the way I believe to do business, the way I learn how to do business. I'll do it to the end. And it was built on relationships and friendships. And, it's never going to change for me.
How many people are you employing at any given time with like these
On
events?
the low
you're
end.
doing?
Oh, well, I think this past season we hired, God, what was it? We hired 70 more waiters. So we probably had a call list of about close to 100 now.
Wow.
And, we've had some weeks that we've had our payroll was up to 300 employees for that week. So
you're doing multiple events at the same time sometimes, right?
Yeah, like next Thursday, we have 9 events.
It's crazy.
I mean, you just never know when it's going to, I try to control part of my job because we've expanded so much now with, all the Selby Gardens, the Bay Preserve, the Orbis, Michael Zenni's Ballman. We have something for everybody, Spanish Point. We're still, these are a lot of exclusive contracts. We have a lot of preferred contracts that we, Ringling Museum, Crosley Mansion. So, most people call us and they'll say that basically they're not really focused on what they're going to do yet or where they're going to do it. A lot of people call us and say, where should we do this first and how should we do it? Most of the time now, the locations that we handle exclusively is so busy now that it's really hard to get in there at any prime time. So I'll either try to find dates for people or try to find different locations for people. And really that's part of my job right now is to keep things where you can maintain the quality, not just the quantity.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do. I try to keep it under control, make sure we have enough of captains for that evening, enough of waiters for that evening, understanding the client. I feel like we really, really understand our clients and their needs. And, I can literally look in the computer now and see which events are going on. And I know who wants who for a captain or who should be doing this event. It's 40, I don't know, what have I been catering now? It's 52 years now, I think.
Yeah.
In a long time.
Yeah. So how do you, I guess my question is that as you've grown the business, you've gone up to having events where you're 9 at the same time, 300 people. What have been the challenges or what are some lessons learned from, first of all, being in a partnership?
Yeah.
Right. Where you have 2 heads and 2 cooks in the kitchen in some cases, right? But in a partnership, but then also you're managing this evolving and growing staff base. And have captains and different roles and responsibilities.
Mhm.
What are some of like the lessons learned that you feel like other people could take from what you've done, in
Well,
their own
I think
business?
that we've got employees that have been with us for 30 years, since the day we opened, 35 years. I think you have to analyze your employees first and make them part of your family and part of your company and make sure they're well. I mean, we do every incentive you can possibly do for our employees. First of all, for me, the most important thing that we ever got for our employees was health insurance. That was right off the bat. I mean, I got family members that work for us. Michael has family members. We have friends that have been with us a long time. Insurance was the number one. Well, when we were giving insurance to employees, less than 1% of the country in the restaurant hospitality business was offering insurance. So we were in the upper 1%. And then we tried to put together, we try to do some type of bonus programs. If we're making money, everybody's making money. We do bonuses for Christmas. We do bonuses for end of season. I got to tell you, during the pandemic, we didn't miss one bonus, even when we were closed. People still received their bonuses and people got pay raises, and we didn't lay off a person. So we kept them all on board. We kept them all working. You go home and think about it a little bit and say, can I keep this going?
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky we were able to keep it going. So we've always been conscious of look, it's old school, but your company's only as good as your employees. It's true. And nowadays it's even truer than ever.
Yeah.
All these, with these shortages of good employees and stuff, people say, oh, you got the best employees, you got the best captains, this and that. We celebrate together. We have our good times, we have our bad times, but we try to do our family day with the employees, holidays with the employees. We try to do everything. When we have a big holiday party at my house, I think you've been there actually, and your dad's been there. But you'll notice all my employees were invited too, So, I don't know. The employees, look, Henry, who's been with us, I don't know how many years. Henry just turned 70, I mean, most of us are in our 60s, myself, Tracy, Dougie, everybody's been around, Jimmy Shava, Jeff, Ray, all of us. We're all in our 60s now. We've been together for like 30 years.
Yeah.
So, look, I mean, it's the way I chose to do it. It worked. I don't know if people think that way anymore. I don't, I mean, again, if you came into our company from an outsider and did a review of our company, you would probably come up with 10 ways that we could, cut a little bit of the fat out of it and this and that. But I probably disagree with you with most of them because a lot of them pertain to employees and laying off employees during the summer and doing this and doing that. We've never laid off anybody during the summer. We've always budgeted accordingly. We know we're going to, and I've got a couple of my friends that run their companies like this too. We know what it's going to cost to make it through a summer. We have some people that worked for us that basically we'll tell them, look, you're working like 9 months on, 3 months off. You'll have 3 months where you got nothing to do, and 9 months you're going to give me all you got. And they're fine with that. But I don't know. I think that we've always been able to build a good company around hiring the right people. And as we bring in somebody new, we just actually hired a catering manager right now. And it's the first catering manager I've ever had in 37 years, but he's coming up from somewhere else in the company, and I mean, I knew him, but I don't know him that well, but he was sort of voted in by some of the employees that really said, you really should give him an opportunity. And, on and on. He's turned out to be a great employee, and he wants he shows the motivation that he wants to learn, and that's all I ask. I've been interviewing catering managers for years, and, some of them just, I don't know, doesn't work for me. I think I always have to be teaching somebody. I don't think I can always just bring somebody who knows it all. I just don't think that would work for me. Well, not my personality anyways.
Well, you want to bring somebody up,
I'll bring him up, but teach them. I love teaching. One time I got called over. I had a busboy that used to work for us, and he was graduating high school at Sarasota High School. And, he said to me one day, he says, would you mind coming to talk to our class? And I said, okay. I said, what do you want me to talk about? Just, he says, a lot of us just don't know what to do next, and they were all seniors. And I got to tell you, it was the best round. We went in a room, and I was shocked. There was about 50 kids, and we had this big circle sitting around and this and that. And I sat in the middle of it, and I was throwing a lot of questions out at all of them, and I saw a lot of confused kids, a lot of confused kids that didn't know where to go next, and they didn't know if they should be going into computers. They didn't know if they should be going into AI. They didn't know if they should be going here and this and that. And I said to them, I said, guys, I gotta be honest with you. I said, there is nothing wrong with working with your hands. I don't know what anybody's telling you nowadays, but, I have a lot of friends that are plumbers and electricians and running very successful businesses, making more money than a lot of people. And, I said, so you don't always have to be going that route. If you enjoy working with your hands, I could never have been the person sitting behind a computer doing technology. It would never be me in a million years. First of all, I don't think my mind works that way. But, ask me to go set up a party for 300 people and tell you where to put all the tables and chairs and colors and shine, this and that, I get energized. I love it. I get energized. The more details from me, the better.
Yeah.
I love doing layouts.
I always know when you do an event because you can tell it's, they're all the perfect little details are there. And
I go sometimes after everybody, people don't realize it, but I go after everybody's done and I go with a tape measure and get things to where I want them to be within an inch. But that's just, and I'm never going to change from that. It's what I'm going to do. I'm going to always be like that.
You still chef it up a little bit?
No, I don't. What I do is I work on recipes a lot. I write a lot of recipes. I research a lot of recipes. I stay very attuned with recipes. So like we'll do tastings all the time, which is fun. But, again, I focus more on catering. Catering is like a science.
Yeah.
And I just had a meeting with some people a couple hours ago and I was explaining to them, I said, because they said you should be speccing out, you should be doing, everybody's always telling me what to do, by the way. And I said, well, let me explain to you. And I showed them a picture and I said, this is why I do things the way I do. I said, because if you're looking at this picture, we gave this company an opportunity to cut what they call chateau beef for us. We gave them an opportunity to cut things the way we needed them cut. This is the week we got them. We took pictures. We got them this week. The second week, this is how we got them. And this didn't work. So they got back 300 pounds of meat that was cut, right?
Yeah.
So catering is you have to take a product and if you're preparing one dish, it's a science.
Yeah.
What's going to work? Is the sauce going to break? Is it going to blend with this? Is it going to work with that? How much time does it take to cook this dinner? If you're giving me 1 hour, I can't create something that needs 2 hours to be cooked in ovens and this and that. So you're always thinking it out. And then you got it. And then like the people like in our company, we have a team of guys that can plate up food. We have guys that load trucks, unload this and that. But we have a small team that goes out there and basically they know how to work the ovens. And what they do is they know how to time things. And that's what catering is. It's all timing. If you're doing a lunch for 500 people, it's going to take 20 minutes to plate up while you're going to cook 250 pieces of chicken. And then 10 minutes later, once the chicken's done, you're going to put it in another round of 250 pieces of chicken. That's probably going to come in out of the oven while you're plating up that last 300. And this is how you have to think about it. Or you're going to get the old classic rubber chicken, or you're going to get well done beef, or you're going to get everything overcooked.
Everything's coming out random
so
times.
It really is kind of a science. And, people ask us sometimes they'll ask us for things just can't be done.
Yeah.
You can't.
What's the craziest request you've ever gotten? I'm sure it's a wedding request. It's got to be a wedding request from a bride. Or something.
It's not so crazy anymore. But we're getting a lot of requests for straight vegan weddings.
Oh wow.
My problem with vegan food right now is I don't mind doing vegan food, but I don't want to do all the chemically created vegan food that's out there. Yeah. When somebody says to me, well, there's great vegan cheeses and there's great, well, if you really read the labels, what are you really even getting?
Yeah.
Now, if you come to me and say, I want you to create a beautiful vegan menu with fresh vegetables and great sauces and this and that, that's easy to do. Yeah. But, I'm not just going to go out and buy a bunch of, Beyond Burger, and I'm not going to buy, just not what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I'm not, it doesn't work for me, but if you do some beautiful Indian curry dishes and stuff, they can be vegan and they're delicious. Yeah. That's what I like.
Yeah.
So, we're getting a lot of calls for vegan weddings. We get a lot of calls. Vegetarian weddings.
You guys do everything food wise. There's nothing you guys can't do. It's crazy.
Now, we've done Chinese. I did a whole Chinese buffet for a wedding one time. Indian is people ask you all the time, and I've had some fun because there's a couple of restaurants here. There's a restaurant in New York. There's a restaurant in Orlando. Now I've got one company that I'm going to be working with in March to do a 3-day Indian event, and they had their own chef out of New York that they love, and I said, bring them down.
Yeah.
You know, so they're going to bring them down. We're going to do it in our kitchen. We got all the bodies to do it and everything. We'll follow his recipes. We're not, it's fun. It's
That's
a learning
cool.
lesson. We're excited about it. I worked with an Indian chef in Orlando one time. I work with my friends over here in Sarasota.
Yeah.
That do a great job. I mean, so I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of different chefs like that. And we worked with some of the big name chefs at times too. It's funny because I've worked with some top-notch guys that again, they're restaurant guys, but man, they don't know how to get 300 meals out. I mean we worked.
They can perfect the four.
Oh my God,
top.
we worked a couple times with a couple of chefs like that. And we'd just kind of jump in and take control. We're like, this has got to go.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't sit here putting dots on the plate, 300 plates much longer. People out there want to eat.
Yeah. It's going to get cold.
That was the other thing, because we have a system where we plate, vegetable starch, go. And these guys are laying out 200 plates on the table, dropping 200 whatever, steaks or whatever. And I'm like, well, these steaks here are going to be ice cold by the time you get to that under the table.
Yeah.
So again, we just do it the way we do it.
What's like the weirdest event you've been requested or you've done?
Oh God.
Type of event.
I think one of the hottest ones I ever did was I did an event up in Tallahassee one time, and nobody knew how many people there was going to be. But I think there was there was two things. I did one of those one time. It was 5,000 people in Tallahassee. Yep. And we had to truck everybody up there, get rooms. They gave us a kitchen to work out of, but we didn't know how many people were going to show up. And we made a lot of food and I got to tell you, one of the toughest ones ever was Tropicana was celebrating, and I don't know, it was a 50th, 70th, 100th anniversary, but they took some area, and I don't know if it's a field or whatever, and they invited all the Braden community, and they were expecting 15,000 people.
Oh my God.
And it started at 8:00 in the morning.
Wow.
So we had to work all night long. But I remember having to pick up 5,000 bagels at 3:00 in the morning. I don't know what else was on that menu. This was years ago we did this. The saddest part about it was I don't think 500 people showed up.
Oh my God.
And that was a lot of work. I mean, we had it set up. I don't know. There was 8 food stations and beverage.
Wow.
I mean, we just thought we were going to get killed. And it was supposed to be 8:00 in the morning and nothing.
Wow. That's
Nobody
crazy.
came.
Oh my God. You did some work. My God, I'm forgetting the name now. But Jose Andres? You did something for charity. This was going back.
Well, I've done work with a lot of the chefs. You mean the community, like chefs?
Yeah, but there was a big. I'll look it up. I'll think about it after we're done with the podcast, probably. But it was some big thing I saw you did during COVID. Actually, I think it was. If I remember, I'll let you know.
We do a lot of what a lot of people ask me to do is like if there's going to be 4 or 5 restaurants involved in a charity event.
Yeah,
they're asking me more and more if I would just orchestrate it for them. And I'm very respectful to I'm respectful to all restaurant people, and they're all my friends. I love them all. I think they all do a great job in the community. And so I'm able to tie them all in. And what I'll do is I'll basically take the lead. And when I say take the lead, I will organize every single thing down to the plate that they want because I know what they're looking for. I'll organize the waiters. I'll organize the plates they want. I'll organize everything. Ovens, understand their menu, understand their food. Who needs a steamer? Who needs a flat top? Who needs this? Who needs that? And I'll have everything there ready for them to go. And, they're very appreciative of it. So I'm being asked more and more to do that kind of stuff. And that's more like almost like a volunteer thing.
Yeah.
And I'll bring Jamil down. Jamil will come and run the front, back of the house, make sure all the chefs have everything they need, the front of the house. And what we'll make sure of, because again, sometimes you're talking about restaurant people, we'll make sure of whatever they're doing, we'll make sure that they can produce it in the timely fashion to get it out to 250 people. Sometimes that's what they don't get.
Is that like a forks and corks type thing? Like a
but this is more like sit down dinners.
Oh, sit down dinners. Yeah,
like each restaurant takes a course.
Oh,
So it takes
not like just pass.
Yeah, no. This is much more than that. So we do this for a few organizations now, and we do it. we're so good at it, to be honest, and we have the chefs and everybody to do it, and the front of the house people to organize it, and it's fun. It's fun to see some of their dishes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll call me and they'll say, Phil, I need this, I need that, and we'll discuss their
Amber Alert.
and we'll discuss their dishes. And by the time we're discussing it, and I'll say to them, I don't think we can get this done, for the time that they're giving us to do it in, and the amount of staff we have, and this and that. One time I did do you're making me think about some of these tough events. So I did 600 people at the Ringley Museum one time for a French served menu.
Oh, wow.
They wanted everything French served. I don't think there's a day and age we could ever do that again. But it took we had almost 100 staff on the tables, French serving it, and that was tough.
That's wild.
And that type of service.
That's intensive. Yeah.
I would never take it on again, to be honest. But we do a lot.
What's advise you against that?
What's probably replaced that more than anything now is, we don't do as much family style menus on the food on the table. But what we're doing now is we'll do a nice entree. Somebody, create a nice, beautiful plate you served. But let's just say if, you go to the restaurant, you love the truffle mac and cheese. Everybody loves the truffle mac and cheese at the restaurant.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look pretty on the plate. So everybody gets served a meal, and then we'll have somebody come around with 3 different dishes on the table, and there'll be a truffle mac and cheese. Let's just say that you happen to love some type of seafood dish, but not everybody loves it. So you don't want to put it on the plate. Give them the seafood dish. You can pick another one. And so we combine our served dinners with these family style meals. It's a really nice way.
Truffle risotto.
Truffle
risotto.
risotto.
The ones I always request.
Truffle risotto. I said to somebody the other day, I said, people that like scallops love scallops, but a lot of people don't want to put them on dinner. But to get some beautiful, broiled scallops with some beautiful, porcini dusted and, maybe a little sun-dried tomatoes or something, and put it on the table. And people can take a scallop with the meal. Sure. And this is a really nice way to dine right now. You kind of get a little bit of everything. And sometimes the stuff on the table you don't realize, but it could be all vegetarian. Truffle mac and cheese could be vegetarian. Cauliflower, the dish that we make, could be vegetarian. You could do Brussels sprouts. You could be a lot of vegetables. And then the person that's a vegetarian, they can basically just get a plate in front of them and they're happy.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. It's food is, what I love about food and the experience of dining and events is that there's so much creativity. But to your point, when you have to scale that, it takes a lot of extra planning. But still, the amount of creativity that goes into an event, I've put together some events just for fun, maybe for things that I've done, fine events, stuff for just business. And I'm sitting there and I'm going back through and I'm going through a checklist of everything. And I'm like, I forgot that. It's something that an experienced event planner would be like, I already have a checklist for this, right? And I'm like, there's all these little details that I'm not really great at, but those are things that are so critical.
I think the biggest thing I see right now is, I pretty much look at almost every menu that goes through the company. And, I see a lot of, menus that aren't balanced, and I look and I'm saying, and I'll send it back to clients nowadays. And I say, look, I can tell you that, you have not one vegetarian item on here. You have to have at least one.
Yeah.
Or, you got 3 meat items, but you have no seafood on the menu. And I think you always have to be careful if you're not picking what you love, but you have to pick what the average person loves.
Yeah.
And I think we look at it as a different way that they would look at it.
Sure.
And then I have people that won't pick one meat because I don't eat meat. Well, you know what? A lot of people don't eat shellfish and seafood that do eat meat, So I always look at a second set of eyes. And I got to say 99% of people really kind of listen to my comments.
Yeah.
So we keep an eye on that a lot. And I think, from the creativity of the menus, we have a file of menus that are just basically for 50 people and under because they're 15-step dishes. But if we're doing it for just 50 people, it can be done. Okay. But we can't do it for 500. Remember, as a caterer, nobody really cares about us. They give you a timeline, right? Salad, entree, and dessert, 500 people, 1 hour. This is what you get.
That's it.
So when the captains, and I'll have a meeting with the captains or I'll have a meeting with the chefs or somebody, and I'll say, okay, look, guys, you got 1 hour. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Okay. You're going to serve salad to half of this room. Okay. And by the time the other half is eating their salad, you're going to start serving dinner on the other end of the room. By the time they're done, you're going back to the other end of the room. Then you're going back for dessert. And then when you put all that together, you might be done in an hour.
Yeah.
You know, but people don't understand. You stop and got to say, okay, 500 people, it's going to take 20 minutes to do the first course. But now you're hoping that all those people are eating.
Yeah.
And that's not, you know, people like to socialize and dine.
Yeah.
If I have one big complaint, which I've seen more recently than not, I don't understand what everybody's rush is. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, why? We seem to be in a rush to eat more than ever. You know? I mean, we go in the ballroom, they give you 30 minutes for lunch sometimes, like 30 minutes for lunch. Like, you know, an extra 30 minutes tacked on the end isn't going to kill anybody. And I think the majority of people don't want to be quite rushed like that.
Yeah, I want to.
You know, so I'm always begging for that extra 30 minutes lately.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I don't know what I just don't know. I don't know what the rush is.
Event timelines are rushed.
Yeah, but it seems to be more and more, you know, and the funny thing is, I think it's completely opposite. You know, people are eating, they're dining. You know, we have now our big thing is we like to put the buckets of wine on the table now for everybody. We think they enjoy that more. You know, we're doing that more and more in events. And we're telling people that's what we should do. They want to pour their wine. Sometimes they want 2 or 3 wines on the table. You know, the biggest, if anybody asked me for the biggest trend in this whole hospitality business right now is it's more, you know, there is so much more focus on liquor right now than food. It blows my mind.
Wow.
You know, I mean, the specialty cocktails, the this, the that, you know, the levels of liquor, the bourbons, you know. So the first question we ask everybody now is, you know, we have 3 different levels of bars and we show everybody what they are and this, that. But when we're meeting with like a bride and a groom or somebody, we'll turn around and say, okay, most of the times the grooms have 2 things they want to know. What the food is, they could care less about the color of the tablecloths and all this. And they want to know what the bar is, you know? And then I always say to the, you know, if I'm just meeting with their fiance or something, I'll say, look, have you spoken to him and have you asked him about the bar? Because every time I say that, he comes back, you know, and he says what he wants on that bar, whether it's a bullet or it's whatever, you know, there's always 2 or 3 liquors on.
Or something,
yeah, they want specific liquor on the bars. And it's not even as much as, you know, like it used to be like, you know, there was like a martini, this and that. Now it's a lot of just quality liquor. Yeah. You know, little by high end. So, you know, we're very conscious with a lot of people that, you know, they say, Phil, I love this scotch, you know, it's $200 a bottle. Well, you've already paid for the bar. So if you say you want 2 bottles of this scotch on the bar for it's $200 retail. I'll just charge you the $200 retail and put 2 bottles on the bar because that's what makes you happy.
Right.
You know, if I was going to give you my normal markup, you'd be paying $2,000 a bottle. So, but you've already paid for the bar. I know this is just a little addition, but you know, so we want to make sure that, you know, we want to make sure they got the right booze, they got the right alcohol that they drink. You know, and then of course, you know, food is just food. Yeah. It's complicated.
So you mentioned in the event space, right? The food and event space, you said, timing is critical, the details, the relationships. What are some other things that you feel like are missed marks or opportunities for other people in events that they could be doing better, right? It's like big lessons you've learned, right, over the last 30 years.
Well,
do you feel like it's missed mark and, you know,
I think that sometimes you got to look at as you're growing for sure. You can't look at the bottom line always. I think you got to, and this is a problem, and I see this going forward with, you know, all, you know, corporate groups and not corporate groups, but companies that are more corporate than we are. It's bottom line, bottom line, bottom line. You know, we don't really work like that. I mean, when I look at menus and I look at groups, you know, look, we do so many groups. We do so many nonprofits. We're doing so many high school nows and all the sports teams, and the budgets are not there. You know, they're just not that high, but we want to make sure they get a quality product, you know? So we're constantly just, you know, they'll put the menus in front of me. I'll see the budget and then I'll cross this out and they say, no, you got to do this anyways, you know? So they're not really paying for it, but they just, you know, we're just stepping it up the game. And I think if you do that for 200 people in that room, there's always somebody in that room that appreciates what you did to take it to the next step. And I tell you, Mike, I mean, I've been at this a long, long time. And if you go back to the beginning, when we had done a couple of our first big jobs, and we didn't make a penny. I think one time we lost $5,000 on it, but I got to tell you, it was actually an event called Action Auction with General Heiser and New College. That's me going back 35 years ago when we first got started. And I'll never forget, we ran the numbers. We lost $5,000. General Heiser called me up to his office. And of course, you don't want to get, if anybody listening to this knew General Heiser, you don't want to get caught up to General Heiser's office. Okay. Anyways, I got caught up, sits me down, and he was tough but fair. And he told me everything I did wrong that night. Right. And he says, and we'll see you next year. So it was expensive. We did a few things wrong. We put a lot of investment into it to make it as nice as we could, this and that. And he was, basically happy. And, from there on, we ended up tapping into the nonprofit world and all the old time events, Picnic, Action Auction, the Mistletoe Ball. And then we started going into the clam bakes and the this and the that, and then we were doing, God, what was the big one at Ringling that we used to do? Oh, I can't remember the name of it. It was just be 1,200 people. You couldn't even get a ticket for it. The Ungala Gala.
The Ungala.
We did that for years.
The Ungala, yeah.
So, to give any advice to anybody, just, focus on the quality at the beginning, not the money, and the money will come because, the people, eventually you will evolve. People will understand what it takes to be, takes to be quality. And, I got to tell you, the community, they got to a point where, somebody once said this to me. They said, Phil, if you can just feed our husbands and make them happy, the money will come. And I said, all right. I said, so what you're telling me is give them a great dinner, give them a nice glass of wine or whatever they want on that bar, and they're going to give money. He said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much how it works now.
Yeah.
And, now well, I shouldn't say just the husbands now because it's all evolved now. We're talking about 30, 35 years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
So, that's what was always my focus. And anybody goes into business, just, like I said, focus on the quality of it, before you get into the quantity and it'll grow with you, and make sure your employees are taken care of right from the beginning, and, you can't go to this type of business and say, okay, right away, my food cost is going to be 30%. Okay. Food costs, that might have to be 40% for a while. And do a spectacular job in this and that. So you're not going to your food cost is going to go down to 30% when you do a great job and you're able to raise your price a little bit more to justify the quality of your product.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's going to come down. And I'm not going to say it works for everybody, but it worked for me.
Yeah.
I've done it this way my whole life. I've always been fair. And I have no problem telling somebody what goal they're trying to hit is virtually impossible, and I just got off the phone with somebody on my way over here, and, they were trying to put together an event, for 100 people, and it's a luncheon, and they have no money for it. No money was in the budget for it, so they can't afford to do it, but they got to feed 100 people smile. And I said, look, the easiest way to feed 100 people is don't call just one caterer like me, call 5 caterers. And get everybody to give you a portion of the meal. Doesn't hurt so much. I said, I'm going to give you the lead. I'm going to give you 150 croissant sandwiches. I'm going to make you a big salad, and I'm going to make you a dessert. Now go get 4 more caterers to give you a little bit, and you're going to have this big, beautiful buffet to feed all these children that nobody put a budget together to feed them.
Sure.
And that you should be able to do all day long.
Yeah.
The donations that come into our place is minimum 5 a day. I don't think we turn down anybody, whether it's going to be a gift certificate, whether it's a food donation, whether it's, when we cater the events, because you've been into them, you see all the dinners for 10 and the wine cellar that we donated dinners at Michael's on house, or now we've got this thing we're doing with Oslo with Mark Famiglio, and Mark Famiglio's giving his yacht, but Mark wants dinner, so we tied in the yacht with dinner for 10 for Michael's on East. We tried to tie. We have something we just tied in with, Hugh and with their boat, and we're going to be doing the same thing with them.
Gold Coast, Gold Coast.
So Gulf Coast. So we're going to be tying in with them now too, and we put together a nice program for some of those nonprofits because a lot of times you'll go to the auction and people would always say, well, we auctioned 3 of them. Well, I always tell everybody, auction as many as you can. We got a nice structure for them. The first one's totally free. The second one, you just pay a little cost to cover it. The third one, you pay a little cost to cover it. So when you pay me, $4,000, but you just took in 60,000 on 3 of them, you do the math.
Yeah,
I mean, it works
not
well.
bad.
So we used to be, you'll only get one, or I'd get a phone call at 8:00 at night. They're in the middle of the auction. Can we give another one? I was like, let's address this right off the bat, okay?
Yeah.
Give as many as you want. Here's what it's going to cost, at the end of the day. And I got to tell you, we started doing that years ago. It was the smartest thing we ever did.
Yeah.
And it worked well for everybody. I mean, and we got a lot of creative ones now. Like I said, they're tying them into yachts. They're tying them into, and we've had some clients, that bought, things from, some of these auction items. My policy is that, Michael handles, of course, the ones at his house, but anything outside Michael's house, my policy is that anybody that buys anything has to talk to me directly. Okay. So when they buy them, because a lot of times the nonprofit will try to get a little involved, I said, let me talk to them. 90% of the time I know who bought them anyways, have a good conversation. I said, my job is to make sure that they just spent $10,000 a donation. I want them to be happy. And when I say be happy, I want to make sure they got everything they possibly want, and that's why those auction items that we donate is so successful. A lot of repeating customers, because we go give them, when we do Bay Preserve, we do, I don't know how many, sometimes they get 4 or 5 of them. We have a whole plan down at Bay Preserve, that we do these for. We've done them for us, everybody, Selby, now that we're involved in the, the Aura, which is our latest exciting project. And, we feel like we've now come full circle because, we had a ballroom that sat 200, 350 people on the average. The Selby Gardens is really, really a premier wedding venue in Sarasota. It's always busy. Bay Preserve, always full. Spanish Point is coming around, now that we're involved in down there. There's always the request. First of all, the requests for weddings are off the charts. But what we didn't have the indoor facility for 600-700 people anymore, and we lost a lot of groups that outgrew Michael's on East, and now with this new project that we did, we have all those groups coming back, and it's pretty exciting. But, we're going to, when we go kick into January in the Aura, we're going to be up by 400 to 500% over this year.
That's crazy.
With our bookings now.
Awesome.
And that's just scraping the surface down there because the facility has everything you could possibly want.
Yeah.
It was built amazingly, and we're proud to be part of it. My new saying is, I wish all this happened 20 years ago, but it's okay. It's been a good run anyways.
No, it's been a great journey. I appreciate you coming in.
All
Can't
right,
believe we've been talking for an hour.
Have we really?
But I can listen to your stories. You have plenty of good ones to tell.
All
I appreciate you coming in and sharing with me.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Brad.
It's good to see you.